In the cold winter of 1295, beneath the towering stone walls of the French royal palace, a child was born who would one day shake the foundations of two kingdoms. Isabella of France, daughter of King Philip IV, known as the Iron King, entered a world forged in power, diplomacy, and ruthless ambition. From the very beginning, she was more than a princess. She was a weapon, a symbol, a political storm waiting for the moment to strike. Her eyes, sharp even in childhood, seemed to hold an awareness far beyond her years. Her father trained her not as a delicate ornament of the French court, but as a keen observer of politics, a listener of whispers, and a learner of men's secrets. She grew up surrounded by the grandeur of the Capetian dynasty, wearing silk and gold, yet always aware that royalty was a life of performance, manipulation, and survival. By the age of 12, Isabella's destiny was sealed. She was to be married to Edward II of England, a union meant to bring peace between two eternal rivals. France and England, two kingdoms bound by blood, divided by ambition. And Isabella, still barely more than a girl, was the pawn placed on the board to hold the fragile truce together. When she arrived in England in 1308, the people watched in awe. Chroniclers wrote of her beauty, the fairest of the fair, with a face that could calm tempests and a presence that illuminated courts. But beauty alone could not prepare her for the storm she was entering. England under Edward II was not a stable kingdom. The young king was passionate, emotional, but disastrously dependent on a man who would become infamous across history, Piers Gaveston. Isabella entered her marriage with hope, believing she would share power with a husband who respected her royal blood. But Edward's heart, attention, and loyalty belonged elsewhere. Gaveston was not only Edward's favorite. He was the king's obsession. The new queen found herself sidelined, ignored at her own coronation banquet, humiliated as Edward placed all honors and wealth not upon her, but upon Gaveston. The English nobles simmered with rage, but Isabella remained silent, watching, learning, waiting. Her French upbringing had taught her one truth: patience could be a devastating weapon. The barons eventually forced Edward to exile Gaveston, but the king brought him back again and again, each time more defiantly. It was not until Gaveston was captured and executed by rebellious lords that Edward's fury ignited a civil crisis. Through all of this, Isabella maneuvered carefully, presenting herself as the loyal queen, the peacemaker, the dutiful wife. Yet inside her heart, a quiet fire grew: anger, humiliation, and a thirst for her own power. Years passed, and Isabella gave birth to 4 children, including a son who would one day become Edward III. But even motherhood did not protect her from the political earthquakes shaking the kingdom. After Gaveston's death, a new favorite rose: Hugh Despenser the Younger. If Gaveston had been arrogant, Despenser was venomous. He sought to control the king completely, crush the nobles, seize lands, and eliminate every threat. And Isabella, poised, intelligent, and respected, was his greatest threat. Despenser separated her from Edward, stripped her of lands, reduced her household, and even endangered her children's positions. For Isabella, this was no longer humiliation, it was war. In 1325, when political tensions between England and France escalated, Isabella found her opportunity. She traveled to France under the pretext of diplomacy, sent as the king's representative. But once she arrived, she made a decision that would change history. She refused to return. In Paris, she transformed from a neglected queen into a political mastermind. She gathered allies, formed new loyalties, and began plotting the downfall of her husband and the Despenser tyranny. But Isabella's boldest move was still to come. In the French court, she met Roger Mortimer, a powerful English noble who had escaped imprisonment and fled to France. Mortimer was charismatic, sharp, ambitious, dangerous. Together, they formed one of history's most infamous alliances, a partnership fueled by strategy, rebellion, and possibly forbidden passion. Isabella and Mortimer assembled an invasion force, small in number but fierce in purpose. In 1326, they sailed to England with a single goal: overthrow Edward II. As they landed on English shores, support erupted around them like wildfire. Nobles, knights, peasants, everyone disillusioned with the king rallied behind the queen who had returned not as a consort, but as a liberator. Edward and Despenser fled, terrified. The king's power crumbled instantly. Isabella rode across England like a storm, seizing towns, capturing fortresses, and restoring lands stolen by the Despensers. She was no longer the silent, patient queen. She was a commander, a ruler, a force that even kings feared. Hugh Despenser the Younger was captured, dragged before the people, and executed with brutal public vengeance. His fall marked the symbolic end of Edward's tyranny. With Despenser gone, Isabella turned to her final objective, removing Edward II from the throne. The king was captured and forced to abdicate in favor of his 14-year-old son, the future Edward III. England now had a new king, but the true power rested in Isabella and Mortimer's hands. For the first time in English history, a queen ruled the kingdom. But power, once tasted, becomes a dangerous addiction. Isabella and Mortimer governed England with heavy hands. Their decisions grew harsher, their spending excessive, and their enemies multiplied. Rumors spread whispers of corruption, greed, and the troubling fate of the deposed king. Edward II died in captivity under mysterious circumstances. Some chronicles claimed he was murdered, others that he died from illness. But in the eyes of the people, the stain fell upon Isabella and Mortimer. The once celebrated queen was now seen with suspicion, fear, unease. Her son, Edward III, now older and aware of the power dynamics around him, realized the kingdom would never obey him as long as Mortimer controlled the throne. In 1330, the prince struck back. In a daring nighttime raid, Edward III seized Mortimer and arrested his mother's allies. Mortimer was executed. Isabella was spared because she was the king's mother, but she was stripped of political power and placed under luxurious house arrest. The queen who once commanded armies and toppled a king now lived quietly, her influence gone, her legacy debated. In her final years, Isabella turned toward religion, reflection, and the company of her children and grandchildren. She died in 1358, after a life that had reshaped England's monarchy forever. Isabella of France remains one of history's most complex queens, neither hero nor villain, but something far more compelling. A woman born into politics, shaped by betrayal, driven by ambition, and feared for her ability to change the course of nations. She was a princess of France, a queen of England, a rebel, a mother, a strategist, and a storm in human form, a woman who refused to be silent. In a world ruled by kings, and in doing so brought two nations to their knees.